The humming of laboratory equipment created a soothing white noise that Dr. Mai Lin had grown accustomed to during her 3 months aboard the Orbital 7 research station. Through the reinforced glass window of her lab, the swirling atmosphere of Zeta-3 painted streaks of violet and amber across the eternal night of space. The planet below, their subject of study, had shown promising signs of microbial life forms unlike anything catalogued in Earth's biological archives. Lin adjusted her safety goggles and double-checked the containment field settings on her workstation. The small vial in front of her contained what could be the most significant scientific discovery of the century. Xeron, a DNA-like structure from samples collected on Zeta-3's upper atmosphere. Unlike Earth's double helix structure, Xeron formed intricate spiral lattices that seemed to communicate between strands through quantum interactions. "You're working late again," called a voice from the doorway. Jake Thompson, the station's lab technician, leaned against the frame with a steaming mug in his hand. His sandy blonde hair was perpetually disheveled, giving him the appearance of someone who had just rolled out of bed. Despite his meticulous work ethic, Lynn smiled without looking up from her microscope. "The preliminary results are promising. I think we're onto something revolutionary with the Xeron's reaction to Earth stimulants." Jake approached, placing his mug on a coaster well away from the sensitive equipment. "Coffee break?" Even brilliant scientists need caffeine. Actually. Lynn straightened, her eyes bright with the fervor of scientific curiosity. "That's exactly what I'm testing today. The effect of caffeine on Xeron bacterium growth rates." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You're feeding alien bacteria. Coffee?" "Not exactly. I'm introducing caffeine molecules to the Xeron DNA structure to observe potential catalytic effects. Our previous tests with Earth's bacterial samples showed caffeine accelerates certain metabolic pathways. I want to see if Xeron responds similarly." "Professor Hung approved this?" Jake asked, glancing at the security protocols displayed on the nearby monitor. Lynn hesitated. "He wants results before the quarterly funding review. This could fast-track our understanding of exobiology by years. Just be careful," Jake warned. "Remember what happened when Dr. Yamamoto tried introducing terrestrial enzymes to those mineral samples from Europa? This is different." Lynn assured him with the confidence that had earned her this coveted position, despite her relative inexperience with extraterrestrial biology. "I've run 3 digital simulations. The Xeron structure should remain stable with minimal caffeine exposure." Jake shrugged, unconvinced but unwilling to argue. "Want me to stay and assist?" "I've got this. Go get some rest. Tomorrow's atmospheric sampling will need your full attention." After Jake reluctantly departed, Lynn prepared her experiment with methodical precision. She extracted a small amount of coffee from Jake's abandoned mug using a pipette, then diluted it to the appropriate concentration. The Xeron sample glowed faintly blue under the specialized lighting of her containment unit. Beautiful, alien, and entirely unpredictable despite her simulations. "Let's see how you dance with caffeine," she murmured, carefully adding a single drop of the coffee solution to the Xeron culture. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the monitoring equipment erupted with alerts. The sample began to glow more intensely, pulsing with an electric blue light that shouldn't have been possible given the energy inputs. Thin wisps of similarly colored smoke curled up within the sealed container. "That's not right," Lynn muttered, fingers flying across her control panel. The readings made no sense. The Xeron DNA wasn't just accepting the caffeine molecules. It was incorporating them into its structure at an alarming rate, creating entirely new nucleotide configurations. A warning siren began to blare as the containment field registered pressure changes within the sample chamber. The blue smoke thickened, obscuring the culture dish beneath. Something was growing inside, rapidly, impossibly fast. Lynn hit the emergency containment button, but it was too late. A hairline crack appeared in the supposedly unbreakable glass of the containment unit. Before she could react, a wisp of blue smoke escaped through the fissure. "Security breach in Lab 7, announced the station's AI in its maddeningly calm voice. "Biological containment failure detected. Initiating lockdown procedures." Lynn lunged for the manual override, slamming her palm against the emergency sanitization control. Decontamination spray hissed from sealing nozzles. But the escaped particles had already disappeared into the ventilation system. She grabbed her communication device. "Jake, emergency in Lab 7. Get a hazmat team here now." Within minutes, the lab was swarming with personnel in protective gear. Jake burst in, already suited up. His expression a mixture of concern and tightly controlled panic. "What happened?" he demanded, checking the now sealed containment unit where the blue glow had intensified to an almost painful brightness. The Xeron-caffeine interaction created some kind of accelerated mutation. Lynn explained, her voice shaking slightly. "The new strain breached containment before I could stop it." Professor Hung, the project leader, strode in with the station's security chief. His normally placid face was tight with anger and fear. "Dr. Lynn, explain this breach immediately." "The caffeine triggered an unexpected reaction," she said, pulling up the rapidly changing data on her tablet. "The Xeron DNA restructured itself to utilize the caffeine as a growth accelerant, creating a new bacterial strain that produces some kind of gaseous byproduct." "Is it toxic?" the security chief asked. "Unknown," Lynn admitted, "but it's spreading through the ventilation system." "Shut it down," Hung ordered. "All of it. Seal the entire research wing." Jake was already at the environmental controls. Too late. The particles have reached the central air processor. They're throughout the station's circulation system. Lynn felt her stomach drop. 67 people lived and worked on Orbital 7. If she'd created something dangerous, "We need to understand what we're dealing with," she said, forcing herself to think like a scientist rather than a terrified human who'd potentially unleashed disaster. "I need samples from the ventilation filters, and we need to track the spread." "You've done enough," Hung snapped. "This is now a containment operation." "With respect, Professor," Jake interjected. "Dr. Lynn knows this organism better than anyone. We need her expertise." A tense silence followed before Hung nodded curtly. "Fine, but this is on your head. Lynn, both of you suit up and collect samples from the ventilation hubs. The rest of us will establish a quarantine protocol." As they made their way through the corridors in their protective gear, Lynn and Jake passed concerned crew members being herded into secure areas. News of a biological containment breach spread as quickly as the mysterious blue particles. "I should have been more careful," Lynn said, her voice hollow inside her helmet. "Save the self-recrimination for later." Jake replied firmly, "Right now, we need solutions." The central air processing unit was already showing signs of the contamination. A thin film of blue-tinted material coated the main filters, glowing faintly under their flashlights. Jake carefully extracted samples while Lynn examined the growth patterns. "It's colonizing the filter material," she observed. "Using it as a growth medium, the caffeine must have altered its environmental requirements." Back in the emergency lab they'd established outside the contaminated zone, Lynn studied the samples under a microscope while a heated debate raged among the station's leadership. "We should incinerate the entire research wing," argued Security Chief Rodriguez. We can't risk this spreading further. That's a last resort, countered Mara Chen, the station's medical officer. We don't even know if this organism is harmful to humans yet. It's growing on our life support systems. Hung pointed out grimly. That's harm enough. Lin tuned out their arguments, focusing on the rapidly dividing cells under her microscope. The new strain, she mentally dubbed it Xeron Cafe, had properties unlike anything she'd seen before. It was consuming organic matter at an alarming rate, but seemed particularly drawn to the synthetic polymers used in the station's filtration systems. "Jake," she called suddenly, "check the pH levels in these samples." He ran the test quickly. They're highly acidic, around 4.2. That's it. Lin straightened up. The caffeine didn't just accelerate growth, it fundamentally altered the organism's preferred environment. It's creating an acidic microclimate to optimize its reproductive cycle. How does that help us? Hung demanded, approaching their workstation. Coffee is acidic, Lin explained, typically around 5 on the pH scale. The Xeron has adapted to not just utilize caffeine for energy, but to recreate its acidity. If we can adjust the environmental pH in the affected areas, we might be able to slow or stop its growth. Jake finished, already calculating the necessary chemical compounds. We'll need to access the central environmental controls, Lin said, and introduce a carefully calibrated alkaline compound into the ventilation system. Before they could implement their plan, the lights flickered and dimmed. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Status report," Hung barked into his communicator. "Sir, the organism has infiltrated the power distribution system," came the panicked reply from engineering. "It's consuming the insulation on the main power conduits. We're losing electrical integrity throughout the station." As if to punctuate this dire news, a series of security doors slammed shut automatically, their hydraulic systems responding to the power fluctuations. The emergency lab was suddenly sealed off from the rest of the station. "We're trapped," Mara said, voicing what everyone realized. Lin shook her head. "No, this is good. We're in the one place with the supplies we need to create a countermeasure." "And how do we deploy it if we're locked in here?" Rodriguez demanded. Lin glanced at the ventilation duct above them. "The same way the Xeron Cafe is spreading, through the air system." Working frantically, Lin and Jake synthesized an alkaline compound that would neutralize the acidity without harming the station's human inhabitants. The rest of the team fashioned a delivery system using emergency oxygen equipment and improvised pressure vessels. "This should work in theory," Lin explained to the skeptical group. "But someone needs to access the main environmental control panel to ensure proper distribution." "The panel is in the central hub," Hung pointed out, "which is currently behind 3 sets of sealed security doors. There's a maintenance tunnel," Jake said quietly. "It bypasses the main corridors, but it's tight, and with the power fluctuations, it could be dangerous." "I'll go," Lin said immediately. "This is my mistake to fix." Despite protests, particularly from Mara about unnecessary risks, Lin's determination won out. Equipped with the alkaline compound, emergency breathing apparatus, and a powerful flashlight, she prepared to enter the maintenance tunnel. The compound needs to be introduced at precisely the right concentration. She instructed Jake. "Too weak, and it won't neutralize the acidity. Too strong, and we could damage the station's systems further." "I understand," he assured her. "Be careful in there. The Xeron Cafe concentration will be highest near the central hub." The maintenance tunnel was barely wide enough for Lin to crawl through on her hands and knees. The metal was uncomfortably warm. a sign of the strain on the station's thermal regulation systems. Her flashlight beam caught swirling motes of blue particles, thickening as she progressed toward the central hub. Halfway through, her communicator crackled with Jake's voice. "Lynn, we're getting alarming readings from the life support systems. The oxygen recyclers are showing decreased efficiency. Whatever you're going to do it fast." "Almost there." She grunted, ignoring the sweat trickling down her back inside the protective suit. The exit to the maintenance tunnel was blocked by a thin film of the blue growth. Lynn hesitated, then pushed through it, the material tearing like wet tissue paper. The central hub was transformed. Blue bioluminescent growth covered every surface, pulsing in rhythmic waves that almost seemed like communication. The environmental control panel was barely visible beneath the growth. Lynn approached cautiously, aware that she was surrounded by the highest concentration of Xeron Cafe in the station. The air felt thick and strangely sweet, even through her breathing apparatus. As she reached for the control panel, the lights went out completely. The emergency backup systems had finally failed. In the darkness, the blue glow of the organism was the only illumination, creating a surreal underwater effect. "Jake, I've lost power at the control panel," she reported, fighting to keep her voice steady. His reply was faint and broken by static. "The auxiliary generator. Manual override." Lynn shone her flashlight around the room, locating the manual generator controls. To reach them, she would need to remove her gloves. The control wheel required more dexterity than the bulky protective gear allowed. It was a terrible risk, but there was no alternative. Steeling herself, Lynn removed her right glove and grasped the generator wheel, turning it with all her strength. After several agonizing seconds, it began to move, and lights flickered weakly across the control panel. Working quickly, she programmed the environmental system to accept the alkaline compound, then connected the delivery canister she'd brought. As the solution entered the ventilation system, she noticed an immediate reaction in the Xeron Cafe growth around her. The pulsing blue light faltered, becoming erratic. "It's working," she reported. "The organism is responding to the pH change." But her triumph was short-lived. A sharp pain shot through her exposed hand, where it had contacted the growth. Looking down, she saw tiny blue filaments extending from the organism, attempting to interface with her skin. Fighting panic, Lynn quickly resealed her glove and increased the compound flow rate. The organism reacted violently. The blue glow intensified to a blinding flash, then began to fade rapidly. Around her, the growth started to shrivel and dry out, flaking away from the surfaces it had colonized. The pain in her hand subsided, replaced by a strange tingling sensation. She would need thorough decontamination. But first, she had to ensure the treatment was working throughout the station. "Jake, status report?" she called into her communicator. This time, his voice came through clearly. "Readings are stabilizing. The organism is dying off in all affected areas. Oxygen levels are rising back to normal." "You did it, Lynn." The relief in the central hub was almost overwhelming as station personnel worked to restore systems and assess the damage. Lynn, after a rigorous decontamination procedure and medical examination that showed no signs of infection, found herself facing a formal inquiry with Professor Hung and the station's administrative council. The Xeron Cafe incident resulted in significant damage to station infrastructure. Hung summarized severely. Power systems, filtration components, and research equipment will require extensive repairs. Lynn nodded, accepting the criticism. I take full responsibility for the breach. My eagerness to advance the research led me to underestimate the risks. That said, continued the council chairperson, your quick thinking and courage in implementing the solution likely saved the station and its personnel from a much worse outcome. The Xeron Caffeine project will be suspended indefinitely. Hung announced. But your analysis of the incident has provided valuable insights into extraterrestrial biochemistry and adaptive mechanisms. Thank you, Professor. Lynn said quietly. I've learned an important lesson about the unpredictability of interspecies biochemical interactions. In the days that followed, as the station slowly returned to normal operations, Lynn found herself both celebrated for her heroism and scrutinized for her initial carelessness. The scientific community back on Earth was buzzing with the implications of the Xeron Cafe incident, with some calling for stricter protocols on extraterrestrial research and others eager to build upon her accidental discovery. Jake found her in the observation lounge, staring out at the swirling atmosphere of Zeta 3. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, joining her by the window. I was just thinking about how something as innocuous as coffee, something millions of humans consume daily without a second thought, could create such havoc when introduced to an alien ecosystem. She replied, It's a humbling reminder of how little we truly understand. Jake agreed. The universe has a way of confounding even our most careful predictions. Lynn nodded. The review board has cleared me to continue my research, with additional oversight, of course. And will you? She considered the question carefully. Yes, but differently. This experience has taught me that true scientific progress isn't measured by how quickly we make discoveries, but by how thoroughly we understand them. 6 months later, Dr. Mai Lin returned to Earth for a scheduled leave. As she stepped into a busy cafe in Singapore, she ordered tea instead of her usual coffee. The barista raised an eyebrow at her change in preference. Let's just say I've developed a healthy respect for caffeine's potential. Lynn explained with a small smile, glancing down at the barely perceptible blue tinge that still marked the skin of her right hand when exposed to certain wavelengths of light. A permanent reminder of the day alien DNA and coffee proved to be a dangerously potent combination. As she sat by the window, watching ordinary humans go about their lives, blissfully unaware of the strange discoveries being made beyond Earth's atmosphere, Lynn couldn't help but wonder what other seemingly harmless interactions might be waiting to surprise humanity as they ventured further into the cosmos. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor and a way of keeping scientists humble. Her communicator chimed with a message from Professor Hung. New samples arriving from Europa expedition. Preliminary analysis shows response to light frequencies similar to Xeron. Your expertise requested. Lynn smiled to herself. The adventure continued, with new mysteries to solve and new dangers to navigate. But this time, she would proceed with the caution and respect that alien life deserved, and perhaps keep her coffee consumption strictly separate from her laboratory work. The incident aboard Orbital 7 would go down in scientific history books, sometimes as a cautionary tale and sometimes as an example of human ingenuity in crisis. For Lynn, it would always be the moment she truly understood the awesome responsibility that came with exploring the unknown frontiers of biology. And every time she smelled coffee brewing, she would remember the eerie blue glow of an organism that had nearly brought a space station to its knees. All because of a simple cup of humanity's favorite stimulant. Lesson learned, she murmured to herself. setting aside her tea and preparing to return to the mysteries of the cosmos. Wiser, more careful, but no less determined to understand the strange new life forms waiting to be discovered among the stars. The blue tinge on her hand pulsed once, almost imperceptibly, as if in agreement. Professor Hung's next message arrived. New protocols established. No beverages in the laboratory, ever. Lynn laughed out loud, drawing curious glances from nearby patrons. Some lessons, it seemed, were universal, even in the far reaches of space, where alien DNA and coffee had proven to be a combination that the universe itself had deemed unwise. As she left the cafe, Lynn looked up at the sky, where Orbital 7 orbited invisibly around a distant planet. Somewhere up there, secured in the station's most protected containment unit, a small sample of Xeron Cafe remained preserved for study, a reminder of humanity's encounter with an alien biology that had developed a taste for caffeine and nearly consumed a space station in the process. The next time she ventured into the unknown realms of extraterrestrial biology, Dr. Mai Lin would remember that sometimes the most dangerous combinations weren't the ones that seemed obviously threatening, but rather the everyday elements of human life meeting the unfamiliar chemistry of the cosmos. In the vast laboratory of space, every experiment carried risks that no simulation could perfectly predict, and she would definitely, absolutely keep her coffee far, far away from alien DNA. For its part, the universe continued its silent expansion, filled with countless organisms waiting to be discovered, some of which might have their own unexpected reactions to the peculiar biochemistry of Earth's curious, coffee-drinking explorers. 6 months after her return to Orbital 7, Dr. Mai Lin published her comprehensive analysis of the Xeron Cafe incident in the International Journal of Exobiology. The paper, titled Terrestrial Stimulants as Catalysts for Extraterrestrial Biological Acceleration, Lessons from the Xeron Caffeine Event, became required reading for every xenobiologist in training. In her conclusion, she wrote, "As we venture further into the cosmos, we must approach each new biological frontier not just with scientific curiosity, but with profound humility. The interaction between Earth's familiar compounds and alien biochemistry can produce consequences beyond our current predictive models. The Xeron Caffeine event demonstrates that even substances as seemingly benign as coffee can trigger catastrophic cascades when introduced to non-terrestrial biological systems. The universe, vast and mysterious, continued to offer its silent challenge to human explorers. Come discover me, if you dare. But remember that your coffee breaks might just change everything." In research stations across the solar system, new signs appeared in laboratories. No food or beverages beyond this point. Remember Orbital 7 and Dr. Mai Lin, continuing her pioneering work in alien biology, kept a small, sealed vial containing a single coffee bean on her desk, not as a sample for experimentation, but as a humble reminder that in the cosmos, respect for the unknown was the truest form of scientific wisdom. The next great discoveries awaited, coffee cups safely stowed away,